Okay, I think that should be good. Hello. How's it going? I have a little addition to the stream. I created a little guy in Blender, but unfortunately, I don't have the program to actually make him run around and do fun stuff. So for now, he's just going to be a little VTuber guy over in the corner. Um, yep. Beyond that, let's see. Today, I'm actually not sure what I'm gonna do. I'm extremely tired. I'm finding that I'm always extremely tired, but that's okay. I think today what's happening is I'm going to be painting some of these guys. I have a friend who plays Salamanders, and I told him that since I didn't want to have the Infernus Marines, I didn't really care about them too much, that I would go ahead and give him a squad of 5. So I think what's happening today is I'm going to go ahead and paint these guys up so that he can use them in the next game we play together. And hopefully, next stream, the audio quality will increase a little bit, because I took advantage of Prime Day and bought myself some things. So let's go ahead and get started, I suppose. What colors am I going to need to start this guy with? I think I'll probably start him with some black. Paint the gun black, paint the other gun black. Probably get the pauldrons black. It'll all be good. Let's see. That's a gray. Don't do that. So, I have definitely gotten back into the exercising thing way too quickly. I've spent the last few weeks kind of not exercising and not really doing a lot of physical activity, just because of how my break has kind of played out. But I've decided that's not what I want to do, and so I have organized my days a little more so I have some more physical activity going on. But what that's caused, unfortunately, is my body, after weeks of little activity, to go, hey, wait a minute, you're not ready for this. And now muscles that I didn't realize could cramp anymore have decided that now's the right time. Let's go ahead and make it so you can't move. And I've had a couple of close calls because of it. I nearly blew out my back again, right on the sciatic nerve, because I tried to turn away that I guess my body didn't like. And so it decided that's the perfect time to warn him that if you do this again, you're not going to be able to move for a week. So I thankfully was smart enough to immediately stop what I was doing and like take a break. But yesterday I tried to get back into the boxing. I tried to skip some rope. I tried to move around a bit, and almost immediately my calf decided that was a good time to cramp. So I wasn't able to do too much of that. And so I'm feeling my age in some ways. Though I guess I'm happy to say that other than being a little stiff today, I feel pretty okay. Something that does tickle me a little bit is that I'm going to be joining a friend next month at an event that he and his friends kind of hold. And it used to be that they would go to a convention and they would do this specific thing at the convention, but that kind of fell apart. So now they just kind of get together at a vacation home thing that they rent out, and they play games, they shoot the shit, they kind of hang out. It's kind of their convention without going to a convention, right? And one of them is an avid martial artist, and he's been doing like kickboxing, karate, a little bit of boxing, that kind of thing. And he's heard and knows that I'm into boxing, and so he apparently specifically told my friend to tell me to bring my boxing gear and my headgear because he wants to spar. And I don't think it's, I'm pretty sure because I've met him before, that it's not really like a dick measuring contest. It's not him trying to be like, oh, so you think you can box? Well, let's see how good you are. It's just that I'm another person who does martial arts, specifically a contact martial arts. So he's like, oh, we get to fight. Let's fight, you know? But given that I couldn't even make it through a round of skipping rope without cramping up immediately, I'm like, oh boy, I really need to get back into shape. And that led to a funny comment yesterday, because we were training, and Buddy said, look, you don't have to prove yourself. He knows you're legit. He's not doing this to expose you or anything. And I had to tell him, no, it's not that I'm worried about being exposed or being embarrassed. It's that I'm worried about, you know, being in the middle of the spar and then having an asthma attack and passing out, because that's a new problem to deal with. But it definitely has now given me a goal and a motivation to start exercising again more earnestly. And so I've been taking morning walks with my wife, and that's been fine and good. It helps warm up the body and all that fun stuff. But in the afternoons now, I'm going to go ahead and start doing a little bit more physical activity, because normally, or throughout the summer, I've been pretty happy with just kind of retreating down into my little rabbit hole and painting minis and not really focusing on much else. And obviously that hasn't been that great for my health, so first of all I need to stop that. But secondly, I've decided that I'm going to start going out and exercising around 4-ish, after I feed my pets. So hopefully just that consistent activity will help condition my body a little bit and condition my lungs a little bit, so that if and when we do spar, we don't end up, or I don't end up face planting in the yard or wherever we end up going, because I am ridiculously out of shape right now. But yeah, I honestly don't remember much about the Salamander paint scheme other than that they're green. They're not an army that I play. I know that they do green and black, but beyond that, I don't really remember much about how their trim looks and what their colors are and how their pads look. I don't even remember what color their backpack is. I'm assuming their power pack is black, because that's what a friend has been painting them as, and he cares a little bit more about the Salamanders than I do. As a matter of fact, one moment please. I'm going to do a quick view. 40k Salamanders. Okay, so it looks like they have black pauldrons, a black backpack. Yeah, that's actually pretty straightforward. Green trim. Yeah, okay. I don't even need to reference that. Now, the thing that always gets me about the Salamanders, and obviously some other people, is that they also have almost like a ashen black skin. And I don't know the origin of that in terms of like marketing, but they've kind of changed, they've kind of described it as the planet that the Salamanders chapter kind of originated from. That's their home planet, Nocturne, has a high level of radiation, and I suppose that just changed the pigmentation on their skin, so they're black in the most literal sense. They're like jet black, or depending on how much light is showing off their face, they're like an ashen gray, and they have these piercing red eyes. So they have this kind of ferocious, you know, villainous look about them, which is supposed to be contrasted by their very general, compassionate, and merciful nature. Unless you are a Xenos, and then they have no qualms in, you know, obliterating you from existence. So, that's kind of, I guess, a neat thing about them, is that they very clearly were tried to be the most, they tried to make them the most human and compassionate of the chapters. And that's shown in that they still have families that they can visit. They still, they're very compassionate and try and save the citizenry of the Imperium. And I believe the fiction pre-Horus Heresy about them is supposed to be pretty good. There's apparently a bit where a Salamander's captain, I believe, I think he's a captain, he finds out that the Marine's Malevolent, who is a chapter that's a successor chapter that's supposedly very violent and very callous. They're like the worst parts of the 40k lore, in that civilians are just kind of an impediment to success. And at one point, they firebombed or nuked or absolutely obliterated a city that was still full of civilians to stop an orc invasion, I believe. And the Salamanders chapter master, or captain or whatever, was so enraged that he went to the tent that the Marines' malevolent captain was in and, you know, called him out on it. And when the guy was completely dismissive, like, what? We just killed some innocent, or we just killed some civilians. Who cares? They're worthless. He beat the ever-living piss out of him. So, in general, the Salamanders are portrayed as one of the more compassionate, emotive groups of Space Marines. And there's, of course, the running meme about Vulcan that if you're an Eldar child, he will gleefully and happily burn you, you know, to a crisp because of doing so in one of his books, which was a Horus Heresy book, which was unfortunately not a good one. I've talked about it before, and it's been a while since I've thought about it, but they were written by a gentleman named Nick Kime, and I still don't really know if it was his writing style or if it was the gentleman who was reading the books, but I found the Salamanders books of the Horus Heresy to be viciously uninteresting and a slog to get through. So, if you are considering reading the Heresy, take that for what it is, or take that for what you will. I hope that if you do read them, you like them more than I did. I will say that one of the books, I think it's Vulcan Lives, has one of the single greatest Vulcan moments in all of 40k, where Conrad Kurz, who is another of the evil Primarchs, the traitor Primarchs, has taken Vulcan and has been torturing him pretty horribly. And since he knows Vulcan can't actually die, he keeps killing him, and then Vulcan revives, and then more horrible things happen. And there's been a running theme in the book that Conrad insists that even though Vulcan has this veneer of compassion and kindness, he's actually no better than Conrad, who just doesn't hide how monstrous they really are behind, you know, a softer exterior. So, he sets Vulcan through this horrific maze where, at the end, and Vulcan thinks he can escape, and he eventually makes it to the center of the maze and finds his weapon, which is a giant hammer, right? And the hammer has a teleportation stud on it that, or Homer, that if pressed, if the stud on it is pressed, it teleports him elsewhere. And so he's been stuck on this ship for who knows how long enough to break a normal human being. And he gets to the center, and as soon as he does, he presses the teleportation stud, or the button, and nothing happens. And then Conrad comes out, and he does a whole evil villain spiel of, like, you know, did you really think I was going to let you free? Did you really think I was going to let you out of here? You know, just the whole thing to try and break Vulcan. And Vulcan tells him, you know, brother, I have to commend you. You've done an amazing thing, and you really got me, but there's one thing you forgot about my teleportation device. And Conrad leans in, he's like, oh, what's that? And Vulcan says, it's also a hammer, and then proceeds to bludgeon him near to death with the thing, which is incredibly funny. But unfortunately, that is the one bit of Salamander's lore that came out of 30k that was any kind of interesting, and the author Nick Kime managed to ruin it in a later story where I believe he's supposed to be the first captain of the Salamanders. He is adamant that Vulcan is still alive. He does not believe that Vulcan is truly dead, even though the rest of them think he's dead. And at one point he fights a Chaos Marine who's very clearly turned and mutated. I think it's like a Terminator captain of some kind. And he has a little charm wrapped around his neck. It's like a medallion, and I think it's supposed to be a smaller forge hammer that belonged to Vulcan. And as this thing is charging him, and it's clearly going to kill him, he grabs onto the charm, and the narrator mentions that he remembers that, yes, it's also a hammer, and he uses it to beat that Chaos Marine to death, or at least stun it long enough that help eventually arrives and kills the thing. But it just incredibly cheapened that scene and kind of that story even further. And I don't really remember much else. I remember at one point I was reading through the book and I got to like chapter 50 something, and I just distinctly remember them getting there and me going, good lord, how much longer is this book? And then realizing there's like 20 more chapters, and at that point I just stopped. Okay, what else needs to be done on this guy? I think I'm gonna make his little communication panel on his wrist. I think that's gonna end up black. Yeah. Just to create more contrast, because otherwise this is a lot of green to look at. And that is one thing about the Space Marines that does kind of tickle me, is they are just big blocks of color. And that's not necessarily the most interesting thing in the world. Okay. I think also... One moment. I believe that the little respirator is going to end up being green as well. Yeah, based on some of these pictures it is. He's got a gold Aquila, which is going to be very easy. Yeah, this style is pretty straightforward, pretty basic. So yeah, I guess we'll get some browns out so that I can do the leather on his sheath and on his pouches. Then I'll get some red out. And I don't think I need any white because they don't have white eyes. They have black eyes that have little red irises on them. So it's not a whole lot of extra work to do. I just got to make sure I don't screw up the irises too badly. So let's go ahead and paint in the sheath. I decided last time I streamed to zoom in on the camera so that I didn't have to have the camera so darn close to everything I was doing. And I don't actually know if it was a good idea because I haven't looked at the playback of the video that I did that on. But at the very least, it's made painting a whole lot easier for me because I no longer have to contend with the brush or the model or anything else bumping into the camera, and it's been really nice. So I think that might be something I continue doing. Eventually, I'll have a better second pose for my little guy, because all I really did was I posed him in Blender so that he looked like he was talking, just open mouthed and happy looking, and that's all I really did with him. Eventually, I'll get some walking animations done. I'll have to learn to do that, and I'll get some other stuff done with him. But right now, he is just 2 static images. My big plan is to continue following Doig's setup that he's got going on, his tutorials in Unity, to make a little world for my little frog boy to inhabit. And that'll make for a slightly more interactive, slightly more interesting stream, I think. But that also means I'm going to have to model a paintbrush and figure out a painting animation. I might end up having to create a small painting handle and give him a little bit of emotion so it looks like he's kind of doing what I'm doing. But who knows? Oh, that's something I will worry about later because there is no pressing need for any of this. Okay, we got the browns on there. Got the browns on there. Oh yeah, the grip on the tiny little foregrip on his heavy bolt pistol, which I think is a very silly looking gun. I was talking with my buddy Soft Servo yesterday when he was over here training, and something he mentioned that I thought was very funny about the current Primaris Space Marine mask or helmet is that it looks like 2 people kind of combined to design the look of the helmet, and they compromised, and neither side really won. Like, the helmet just kind of looks like an amalgamation of 2 different designs, and neither of them were particularly good, and when they put them together to try and make them better, they actually ended up making them worse. And I vibe with that, because that's kind of how I feel about it. And that kind of goes the same with a lot of the designs for the Primaris Marine line, is they feel like they wanted to keep the classic, they wanted to be evocative with the classic look, but at the same time they wanted to update it. and instead they just made it look less visually interesting. And that's, to me, a huge problem, because part of what makes 40K so fun is the striking visuals of 40K. So when you start having armor and weapons and silhouettes that look like they could be in Halo or something, or generic sci-fi, then it's less fun. Red. That's right, I needed red. But beyond that, I do appreciate the increased scale, and I think they're really neat to look at. Oh, I did see that there's going to be a Warhams thing this Saturday. They're going to do more releases. They're going to do more previews, and they had this thing called the Battle of Aughrim, which went through their launch box, where people could play games with them of any size or whatever, and just use the code on the inside of the box. Hey, Montrevon, good to see you again. How you doing? You could use a code from a little slip on inside your starter box to say who won, right? And so they'll keep it on a poll who's winning, Tyranids or Space Marines, and whoever won that, they said they were going to announce that line of new releases first at this Warhammer thing on Saturday. And so I thought it was very funny. Yeah, it's way too hot outside. It's got to be even hotter where you are, because you're further north than I am, aren't you? So that's pretty miserable, and I'm sorry you're having to deal with that. I saw that in places like in Britain, where, you know, the buildings are definitely more geared towards keeping the heat in because of how much colder it gets. They're really suffering up there. So I can't imagine trying to deal with this kind of heat with it being even hotter and not being in a house that has adequate cooling. Because that's something, at the very least in America, in the South, that we do pretty well, is we have pretty decent air conditioning. How hot is it where you live? I mean, you're probably going to give it to me in Celsius, and then I'm going to have to do a quick Google scramble, because in America we decided we didn't want to use the smart measurement systems. Okay. 38 degrees Celsius. That's way too hot. My understanding is that that's way too hot. 38 Celsius to Fahrenheit is 100 degrees, good lord. It's been in the low 90s for us, and that's been torture. So I can't imagine having to be in 100 degree weather without good cooling. I hope you've got a foot in an ice bucket at the very least, because otherwise you've got to be suffering right now. Yeah, I'm sorry that you're dealing with that. I actually read this morning, and it's frustrating the heck out of me, because we spent so long... I remember all the doomsaying around global warming and climate change when I was growing up. The cellar is cold, at the very least, right? You just go down there and not come back up until it cools down. But Florida was dealing with a strange issue, because I think for the first time in history, or for the first time in modern history, the beaches, the oceans at the beach, were at 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So the water was as hot as, you know, the temperature outside, which is apparently not supposed to happen. My incredibly limited knowledge. Okay, the strap is kind of hidden in there. I don't think I want to mess with that. So yeah, I'm really sorry you're having to deal with that, because that just sounds bloody miserable. Okay, one last thing. Let's check. What colored gun do the 40K Salamanders have? Well, it looks like they're doing silver, and then black for the slide, or for the frame. So I think I'm gonna stick with that. I'm just gonna go ahead and do some metal painting, metallic painting of the gun, and paint over the major parts. with a black casing, so that way you get that nice contrast. So it looks like I actually did his pistol opposite. I'm gonna be really lazy here, and I'm just gonna go ahead and paint over the entire thing in gunmetal, except for the brown foregrip. But yeah, no, the house that I live in, that I bought, was built in 1936, I want to say. It's a fairly old house by American standards, and the air conditioning isn't that great. It's clearly better than what, you know, most of Europe has, but it's not that great. The upstairs is fantastic because it's a ceiling unit, right? Or an attic unit. It's up in the attic of the house. And so there are a lot of vents directly from the attic into the upstairs bedrooms. And so all of those areas are incredibly cold. They're at least 10 degrees colder than the rest of the house. But the main area and the basement are both considerably warmer. The basement especially. And so what I ended up doing was buying some extra fans, and I have the fans pointed from key spots in the house where there are vent grates, so that they're kind of pushing the air out to the rest of the house. And hopefully that will work okay. It seems to be working, because parts of the house that were incredibly warm are now not quite unbearable. But it's definitely a big change from the house I was in, which was a single story. And that one was consistently very nice and cool. Okay, gun looks good. This gun. Gonna need to give him a brown grip up top, which I forgot about. And then he's going to get some bronze for the barrel. And then I've got to start working on the lad's face. I'm not going to be doing these guys to the level of quality that I had been working on for my other guys, because these aren't my models. I'm painting them for a friend, but I'm still going to make them look nice. He unfortunately doesn't have the time nor the space to paint, so I'm doing this for him. Let's see here. Now, if I recall right, I think I also promised him that I would do so simply because I took some of his minis and sold them. I mean, he told me to, but I was going to help him use that money for something else, but I said, hey, can I go ahead and keep the money from these minis if I promise to do really nice paint jobs on your flamey guys once I got them? He was like, yeah, sure. So it's all working out okay. So other than being in the cellar, what else are you doing to try and stave off the crippling heat that you guys are dealing with? And I'm gonna go ahead and shade that a little darker up top. Go ahead and give that a little bit of an outline. There we go. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but something I was kind of proud of that I was able to do was make a little avatar for myself in Blender. And right now, he's just kind of over in the corner, piping up as though he's speaking when I start talking into the mic. But I've been meaning to teach myself Blender now for almost a year. In the cellar, it's 68 degrees, and it's the hobby room. That's fantastic. That means you're actually in a cooler room right now than I am, because even though I am also in a cellar, it's where the washing machine is. And so for some reason, it is unbearably hot down here. It's at least another 5-6 degrees hotter down here than it is upstairs. Which is fine, I suppose. I have a fan down here, and it's going pretty good, so I should be okay. But yeah, since you're in the hobby room, what are you up to? Putting anything interesting together? Painting anything interesting? Silver that out. Silver that out. But yeah, I got that little guy built up, rendered, based him off of a sketch my wife did for me while I was thinking about having a mascot. Sort of have hobby stuff at the moment, basing some parts. That's something I still struggle with. I know how to base. I'm just usually not very good at it because I get really excited about getting the mini, and I just want to assemble the entire thing and paint it and get it based up so I can use it in games. But then I have to kind of go back and base around the work I did. And so they almost always end up looking sloppy. But that's okay, I suppose. I have yet to hear anyone complain. Though I do know that when I decide to put my mind to it, I can make some really nice bases. I did that for the Demon Prince commission that I got earlier this year, and he turned out absolutely fantastic. So, can't be too mad. Okay. I think, outside of some metallic paints, this guy is pretty close to done. Oh yeah, gun. Need to finish gun. Whoops, that's 100% water. Didn't want to put that to the paint. But yeah, I need to get into the hobby habit, the habit of the hobby of basing putting terrain on my bases before anything else. Did I see a beep boop in the Discord? That's not the Discord, that's OBS. That's the Discord. Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, that base looks fantastic. Ooh, you're building a knight. Very cool. Here, one moment. Window capture. Window capture. Yeah, you're building a knight right now. I want to get more into knights, but that looks absolutely fantastic. Awesome job. Which knight is it? I'm based on the legs. I'm assuming he's an Imperial Knight, but the size always gets me. I can't tell if that's a Dominus or a Questoris model. But either way, that looks freaking awesome. Yeah, Imperium Knight 40k. That's going to be fun. I have a single one that I was gifted as a Christmas gift many years ago, and by my wife, and I've shown him off on stream. But at some point, I want to actually build out an allied Imperial Knight force, but at the same time, I also don't need another army. I don't have room for it. So mayhaps when I have more space in the basement, in the cellar, I can go ahead and really build out my armies. Right now, I'm actually trying to keep my army numbers down. I've got that Among Us Leagues of Votann army that I want to kind of move. I don't really want to have it anymore. I got it specifically because I wanted to build Among Us dwarves. I wanted to have the meme. And now that I'm done with it, I kind of don't want it anymore. I want it to be someone else's problem. So I'm going to talk to a friend who expressed interest in buying it but didn't have the money. And if he really doesn't want it, then I'm not going to bother holding on to it, is kind of what I'm getting at. Because when I told him that I planned on selling it, he got a little crestfallen, asked how much would I want for it, and I explained, given that it was the starter army box with an extra unit of Chthonian Berserks, I kind of wanted at least $200 for it, because the paint job on all the guys is pretty good. And he didn't look too happy at having to spend that amount of money, so I think his interest waned. But right now, they're just taking up space in one of my drawers, and all I can think of is how I'd rather have money to paint for my armies that I actually want. Okay, that's about as done as that's gonna get. Oh yeah. Go ahead and paint the little rings on his weapon, or on his canister, his flame canister. I'll go back and touch that up with some black in a second. But yeah, I would love to get more Imperial Knights. They're just such a cool army. I did see that they caused a little bit of a stir with the new edition because of the towering rule, making them incredibly powerful. Though it looked like to counteract that, Games Workshop made the individual knights cost a little bit more, so that I guess you couldn't take as many, and that, or at least not as many as of the big ones. And that would hopefully help balance things out a little bit, because an army of Armigers is far less scary than an army of Questoris or Dominus models, I suppose. Though I gotta say, I am incredibly jazzed at how much easier it is and how much more unique the different armies are. Yeah, that guy nailed it. That is a bolter. Very cool. Okay, what else do I want to do? I think I'm going to do a surface silver on this guy, and then when it dries off, I'm going to go ahead and hit the buttons with the other metallic. Now, I think the next thing for me... Nope, he's got a bullet. I'm going to go ahead and make the bullet nice and brass. And that should be okay once it dries. And actually, looking at it now, I probably ought to make the foregrip have a little bit more spice to it, because it's almost unnoticeable with how dark it is. You haven't read the new rules? They make the game easier to play. List building is much faster. Most of the special rules of the units are on the data cards for the units, instead of being something you've got to remember. A lot less stuff that makes you have to thumb through the book and try and remember those army rules. They have army indexes right now that are each about 4 pages long. It's just a much simpler system than what we used to have to deal with. And it does kind of take away some of the customizability, because a lot of the units, they can have individual kits, but they don't cost anything, so people kind of know what they're going to take, and there's no penalty for taking some nicer weapons. A power fist costs as much as a chain sword, costs as much as a... They're now just grouped together as quote-unquote power weapons. So there's a lot less granularity in terms of point costs, but it speeds up the game tremendously in a way that I greatly appreciate, because one of the worst parts of the game for me was having to do all that building. They now have it so that there's no more psychic phase. Psychic attacks are now on the data cards for the individual units, and they just have a characteristic that's called Psychic, which is also there to help simplify things down a bit. I'm pretty happy with the rules. The few games I've played from the game, or of 10th edition, I've enjoyed far more than any 9th edition game I've played. Okay, what else do I want to hit with this guy? Because I feel like there's more that I'm missing. I think that's what I'm trying to get. I'm trying to get those little green flecks right in there. I do know that on like the tournament level, players are a little upset for various reasons that are beyond my understanding, because I think some of the new rules kind of make tournament spamming really, really broken, but that's only if you play tournament. Bricky of Adeptus Ridiculous did a really good job breaking down the positives and the negatives of the new system, and he basically said that for like 90% of people, the rules have been a fantastic change. But for that 10% that play competitive, it really messed them over. There's the new morale thing doesn't cause models to flee. It's called a battle shock test, and you only take it when your unit is at half strength. And if you fail the battle shock test, it means they are now battle shocked, which means that they can't perform certain actions, and they cannot be targeted by stratagems for a turn. So all in all, they just greatly simplified things down, and I couldn't be happier. Okay, I think... What color hair do salamanders have? Because I know they have hair, some of them. I guess they have black hair. That's kind of no fun. I think I'm going to give him brown, like fiery red hair, and we're going to see how good or bad that looks. Okay, he's going to have a shock of red hair. Just like that, yeah. The other nice thing about it is that the rules, right now, the core rules are free. And the indexes and point costs are free. And the point costs are going to remain free as they're updated. And as far as I understand it, the indexes are going to remain free. They are the baseline rules for every unit, every army. And when the codexes come out, they're going to have newer ways to play the armies, I guess. I'm not exactly sure, but the indexes aren't going to be obsolete as far as I know. So I feel like, you know, I didn't have to spend more money to play 10th edition if I hadn't wanted to. But because I wanted the starter box, and because I wanted certain things with the starter box, I spent a little bit more money. And they have a Warhammer app that they say right now is free, but that's only temporary. The way they put it is full access is available for a limited time. And I hope that it stays free to download the app. Yeah, at the moment free. I think that's just because once they start releasing codex rules, that you're going to have to charge to use those. So if they make, I don't know, a Space Marine codex, which is coming out at the end of summer, and it has different detachments, then you can't use those detachments. The only one you're going to be allowed to use, unless you pay for the book, is the Gladius Task Force one, which is the default one in the... that came out with launch. And if that's how they decide to do things, then I'm pretty happy with it. Because I really like the baseline detachment. I don't think they need to change that one. That's not what I want. I don't think that they need to, I don't think I'm going to need to have anything new. Unless they do something crazy like add chapter-specific detachments for like the Imperial Fists and whatnot. In that case, I'm going to have to go against my own words. Now, let's see. I think, in this case, I'm going to have to go with a little bit of white, because I am going to... Have you tested out the app from Malifaux? I have not. Malifaux was another game I wanted to get into, but no one around me wanted to get into Malifaux, so I've kind of given up on that game. Which sucks, because it's a beautiful looking game. The minis are gorgeous, and there's a lot about it that I thought was super appealing. But my wife is incredibly uninterested in miniature war games, miniature skirmish games. And all of my friends are like, we're barely learning Warhammer 9th edition. We're not going to start a new game with you. So, unfortunately, no, I've had nothing to do with Malifaux because I have no friends around me who are interested in doing Malifaux. But yeah, I love the look of the game. I love the aesthetic. I'm interested in... I was interested in trying to learn it. I kind of just want to start buying the models to paint them on stream, just because they're really pretty models, and it would also give the game some more exposure. But it just hasn't been on my radar. Yeah, my wife is very strongly into Dungeons and Dragons, and and some board games, but that's about where her interest wanes or ends, and that's fine. She doesn't have to be into all the hobbies I'm in, but I think she mentioned that the act of, like, having to buy the minis and then assemble the minis and paint the minis and then finally play a game that looked to her like a tax return, it was just really an issue of there's way too much commitment to get the game to even see if the game interested her. And that's completely fair. There is a lot of stuff you have to do to decide whether or not you even like playing the Warhammer. And she saw me play the game, or she saw me watching a video on how to play the game, and she just got immediately overwhelmed by just how many different steps there were and how many different dice rolls there were. And honestly, that's kind of how I felt when I first saw 8th edition. And I know that 8th edition was a simplified version of previous edition, so it was just like, why am I getting into this? This is way too much. But it just took some dedicated interest and a lot of trial and error from friends and myself. Okay, I just realized I am not on camera at all. Okay. Get a little bit on the cheeks. A little bit more on the forehead to bring it out. And then brighten it up a layer. But yeah, no, Warhammer especially has kind of opened up the door for me in miniature gaming. And it's gotten me incredibly interested in checking out all sorts of different games. So I really want to go to Gen Con this, or possibly next year, not this year, because money is definitely an issue. But I would love to go to Gen Con with my friends and just kind of get swept away by the literal ocean of miniature games that are out and, you know, for demo to play and all that fun stuff. It would just be a really neat way to further engage into a hobby that I didn't have a chance to get into when I was a kid. And is now almost fully available to me. Besides Warhammer, what other games do you enjoy? What other miniature games would you recommend for someone who's trying to break into that hobby space? I saw that a Star Wars edition just came out, and a lot of people were very excited about that. But I've never been a huge fan of Star Wars, so that one felt like it wasn't necessarily going to be my vibe. I know that there's a Lord of the Rings one, and as a kid I always liked Lord of the Rings, but I never got into the fandom the way that some people have. And I also saw that it was made by Games Workshop, so it's like, do I really want to just join another Games Workshop game? I feel like if I'm going to go further into the hobby space, I probably ought to go with something that isn't from the same company. I also don't know if you saw, but they're bringing back Epic 40K, or Epic 30K now. It's not 40K. They showed off an Epic starter box that they painted in the style of the Death Guard. And in one of the first promo shots, they had them facing off against the Iron Hands, I believe. And all I could think of is like, you know, your IP, your marketing, but could you have chosen a more bland color combination to put out there than, you know, cream and green Death Guard and black and gray Iron Hands? Because between the two of them, they're not the most visually arresting looking group. Yeah, I think it looks fantastic and I want to play it, but again, I barely have time to play 40K, so it's like, that's a neat looking thing to come out, but I don't really have time for it. And that's honestly the worst part. I mean, I suppose I can't complain too badly. If that's the worst thing that I've got going on in my life, then I'm doing pretty okay. Okay, I think I might have gone a little bit too bright contrasty for the eyebrows. And I know for a fact I'm way too contrasty on the brow on his head. But yeah, I'm pretty interested in the Epic 40K beyond that point, because being able to play a game where you have huge numbers of troops and you know, freaking titans, that just looks neat. The starter box, I don't know if you saw, actually has like a Warhound Titan as part of the box. And obviously it's tiny, but it's just like, yeah, I want this. And I read that they're actually getting rid of Epic 40K as a thing, which makes me a little sad. But I think it's because just the interest in Aeronautica Imperialis, that's what it is. They're phasing out the 40K stuff in Aeronautica Imperialis in favor of making it all 30K based, which is fine, I guess. I was never into Aeronautica Imperialis, but I felt like that was definitely a game that benefited from having biodiversity between the armies. But you know, Games Workshop knows a whole lot better than I do what their sales figures look like, and if not enough people were buying into it, then maybe focusing down the line is going to make it sell better. Who knows? I do know that they have that Battlefleet Gothic game, which I didn't realize was based off of a actual tabletop game, and finding that out made me really want to try and get into Battlefleet Gothic. Because I got to play the, I don't remember what it's called. Was it X-Wing? The miniature space combat game for Star Wars. And I thought that was interesting. But at the time, I wasn't super into, you have Mordheim. That was my game. Mordheim or Mordheim? Because I think I've heard of that one too. And yet another game that looks super neat and I'd love to get into. That actually ended up being a really good eye. Now let's screw up the other one because I have not yet mastered the angle for this one. Oh, no. That's better. There we go. Now he's got two very angry eyes. One of them was a little gimpy and I managed to fix it. At least I think I did. Did I fix his eye? I think I could fix that a little more. The Warhammer Fantasy Skirmish? Yeah, okay. I got you. Yeah, I think in America, or it's Mordheim with a D in. Oh man, I just screwed that up. In the translations I've seen, but yeah, that's one that looked really cool. Now they've got a couple of different things, right? They've got like Underworlds going to go with Age of Sigmar. I don't know. I went down a rabbit hole with 40K, and I just keep falling and stumbling and seeing new things that I want to play. And a lot of it is starting to become Age of Sigmar Warhammer Fantasy. I actually have some Stormcast Eternals that I bought on a whim from the Dominion starter box, and they're still sitting on sprue in a box in part of the pile of shame that I have, which I've just added to because I got myself a second box of Leviathan on the chance that, you know, people online that I was friends with weren't going to find a box, so I was going to sell it to them at cost, you know, because I hate scalpers and what they do to this game. But it turned out that wasn't necessary because there was no scalping, and so I just had this extra box, and I ended up selling the Space Marine half of the second box to a friend, and now I've got the Tyranid half, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go ahead and paint the Tyranids because they're really cool looking. But that's yet another thing I haven't gotten to quite yet, and it's mainly because I don't know what scheme to paint them. Okay, I think other than shading, this guy is done. Actually, wait a second, I've got some spots on him that I can clean up. like around the ear. His ear piece is stained over with a little bit of him flesh. On this side, I think I've got the opposite problem where I don't have his flesh going as far as I can to the earpiece. Played Warhammer Fantasy a long time ago. I started in the early 90s. Wow. Yeah, you were playing Warhammer when I was dreaming about playing Warhammer. Because I'm in my mid-30s right now, and I just remember walking into a Games Workshop when I was like 10 or 11, because the pictures and whatnot looked so cool. And when I went in there, there were two guys who were painting some models, and I was naturally a pretty shy kid, but I walked over and I said hi, and they both looked up at me and went hi, and then went back to their painting. And then I just kind of left, because it felt like, okay, well, they clearly are too busy, they don't want me to be here, so I'm not going to bother. And that really put me off of tabletop gaming in general because of that one exposure. Until I started meeting people in college who were far more enthusiastic about getting new friends to play these games with. Which really sucks because, my understanding is that Games Workshop employees are generally trained to be very open and polite to new customers, to try and keep people in the store so that they can buy things nowadays. So that was just a bad experience on my part. So what is your feeling on Age of Sigmar? Because I know Age of Sigmar was really divisive for a lot of players because Fantasy had a very fiercely loyal fan base, and Age of Sigmar kind of ended that, I guess, and that was not very well received. Your cousin brought you into the hobby? Well, that's really cool. I don't have any extended family living near me, or I didn't, so I didn't have anyone who could show me that kind of thing. Most of my interests were video games, because that's what the people around me were into. But yeah, definitely a thing I wish is that I had been introduced to some of this stuff a lot earlier by someone a lot friendlier, because it was always something I was interested in, but never something that I felt like I could do. And here I am, doing it. Let's dull that down. I want this to look like it's been soaked in oil. It's been hit with the holy unguent. Same in here. I'm gonna dry brush this entire thing with a metallic, I think, just to really make it pop, because those little bright splotches are really gonna show that even though it's darkened now, there is metallic bits attached to it. That's pretty much it for this. I missed the rank system from Warhammer. I like Age of Sigmar World, but I missed the regiments. Yeah, wasn't Warhammer Fantasy more of what is jokingly called a rank and flank game? And so the square bases had a lot more meaning because you were literally linking models together to make like actual rank and file regiments and whatnot, or whatever you want to call them. And that maneuverability and positioning was a whole lot more important. Okay. Yeah, I can definitely see why going to something a lot smaller and more skirmishy like Age of Sigmar would feel like a severe downgrade. I think it's kind of funny that of all of the IPs, Warhammer Fantasy has by far the most successful video games. Yeah, I think this guy is about as done as I'm going to get him for now, so I think I'm gonna move him. Hey, AKA Former, how's it going? How's it going? I've got a new little talkie guy over in the corner that I built in Blender, and I'm really proud of it because up until I started messing with Blender, I had no idea how to use Blender. Remember what I forgot to do? He's got a purity seal that I didn't bother filling in. So eventually, I'm going to try and have a full world for him to run around and play in, but right now I don't understand or know how to do that kind of coding, so instead he's just going to be over in the corner chilling. Every time I talk, he's activated by my mic, so he'll pop up, say hi, which I think is a fairly common way for PNG tubers to be utilized. But this is all uncharted territory for me. Okay, I got another ping from the messenger. What's that? That is pretty funny. I have a friend over in, or he's vacationing right now over in Iceland, and a volcano erupted in Iceland earlier this week, I guess. And he's a big Magic the Gathering player, and even though it wasn't a goal, he was very interested in getting the One Ring. And so he just made the joke, you know, the fact that a volcano erupted near me and I don't have the One Ring to throw in it. Which is very silly. If I remember right, wasn't the One Ring found and verified and whatnot over in Canada, I believe? Someone in Canada opened the pack? And all I can say is good for them, because depending on what they do with that thing, they are pretty much set for... I don't know if they're set for life, but they are going to be set for quite a while. The friend over in New Zealand, or not New Zealand, over in Iceland right now, he made a joke that if he were to get it, he would throw it in a volcano, or at least find the means to do something similar, but the way he would do so is by crowdfunding and live streaming it. Because, you know, you guys know just as well as I do that it wouldn't be very difficult for a Lord of the Rings / Magic the Gathering nerd to get enough other nerds together to pay for a trip to a place with a volcano, so that they can live stream him throwing it into the fires, or finding a way to getting it dropped into the fires. Either way, he would have become famous. It's like, I don't know if you guys have seen the movie, but the newer Knives Out, Glass Onion. My wife got me to see that movie a few months ago now, I think. And first of all, that was a really good movie. I enjoyed it thoroughly. But one of the big plot points is that one of the characters wanted to be immortal. He wanted to be remembered for all eternity for something. And that led to him making some unscrupulous business decisions that, with an unstable element, and betraying a lot of people along the way. And in the big climax of the movie, he has the Mona Lisa on loan because it's the pandemic and no one's going to the museum, so the museums need to make some money. And in the very big climax of the movie, someone exposes the Mona Lisa right as they set off a reaction with the unstable element. And the guy is really upset because his plans are ruined and everything, and they mention, you know, hey, you know you wanted to be famous, right? Well, now you will forever be known as the guy who destroyed the Mona Lisa. And it's like, yeah, that is definitely a type of fame. That really is. And so, even though he would be reviled by a huge amount of the community for destroying the One Ring, he would also be infamous, because now, as part of that promotion, he would be forever known as the guy who opened the One Ring and then went to a volcano in Iceland and set it on fire. And so I always thought that was very funny, and I secretly hoped that he would be able to do something like that. But he was not opening collector booster packs or whatever in an attempt to get it, so it was all just a pipe dream. Okay, let's go ahead and get this. And for anyone who's not aware, these are not my models. I am painting a set of Salamanders from the Infernus squad that I got with the Leviathan box from my buddy. The idea is good, but $2 million. I know, right? I wonder if he would have been able to make that money back by crowdfunding a trip to Iceland to set the thing on fire. That was my thing, is I wonder if you know, yeah, the one gaming group was willing to pay $2 million for it, but could he have made more than that by hyping up his journey to cast it into an actual volcano? The worst part about that, though, is that, especially, I don't want to call it the worst part, but the thing about that whole thing isn't the person who pulled the card being taxed like over $1 million on it, like 50% of that money is just going straight to the government? Or was that what's supposed to happen in the United States? I don't remember. I just know that was, I have mixed feelings about that, because, yeah, I mean, other than pulling a card, the guy didn't really do anything to earn that kind of money, but at the same time, that just feels incredibly frivolous by the government. I can't remember what tax it would have been, too. Not that it matters too much. I just washed away black paint to pull up the black paint. Yeah, I mean, I could really use $2 million. I don't think there are very few people in this world who couldn't really use $2 million, so I'm just stating the obvious there. But that money would lift a lot of people out of some bad economic situations very quickly. And it's all just kind of amazing to me how much nerd culture has exploded over the last 20 or so years. His hand is not connected. Not connected. That's not good. I'll have to fix that in a minute. Because could you imagine that kind of coverage happening, you know, back in the 90s or 80s? That a company was going to release a single collector's card of something, and then you would have hobby shops trying to get that card. I have to go, it's late, and I have to drive to company headquarters, lots of meetings. Okay, well, thanks for joining me. Go get some sleep. As someone who is very tired right now myself, I can sympathize. Thank you again for hopping by. I appreciate having you here, but get some rest, buddy. Have a good rest of your evening. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Yeah, have a good one, Montravan. Have a good night's rest. Have a good rest of your day, buddy. Okay. My day is gonna go real well. I was going to do more exercising, but then I realized that both my legs are cramping when I try and go up and down a flight of stairs. So that's definitely not happening. So instead, I'm going to hang out with my wife. After I take the pups, or after I feed my pets, she's going to come downstairs finishing her work, and she's going to play some Breath of the Wild, because she got really interested in playing Tears of the Kingdom after watching all of her friends and whatnot social media post about it. And it's like, well, we really can't afford a $70 game right now, but Soft Servo bought the game himself recently, and he has Breath of the Wild, so would you like to play Breath of the Wild to see if you'd even enjoy Tears of the Kingdom? And she went, yeah, sure. So we got the game from him, and then I think it just sat in a bag for like a week. And then finally I convinced her to play the game, and after a little bit of stumbling as she kind of fought the controls, she kind of took to the game and was obsessively playing it for like a solid week. And I thought it was really funny for a little while because we kept seeing the videos from Tears of the Kingdom of people making horrific torture devices for Koroks. And, you know, it's like, they're doofy little plant spirits. Why would you want to kill them? And I asked Soft Servo about it because he has hundreds of hours in Breath of the Wild. And he explained to me that, you know, in Breath of the Wild, to increase your inventory slots, you had to find Koroks. And they were an absolute menace to try and find, and then they would always make you do some stupid little test that ranged from incredibly mundane and boring to enough to make you want to throw your controller. And so she's playing through the game, and she's starting to get these inventory quests, and she's starting to get these Korok quests, and I can just see the evolution happen of her first being like, oh, okay, that's what these are, to god dang it, and just screaming and cussing and being really upset at these guys because of some of how ridiculous and stupid some of their tests are. And it got to a point where, and I think I've already told this before, but I just find it really funny, that she picked up a rock, and there was a Korok hiding under the rock, and it did its whole, hey, you found me, here's a seed, yada yada. And she was just like, oh, great, thanks. And she just dropped the rock, and it hit it right on the head. It, like, just fell and landed right on the Korok's head. So, you know, other than the ambient noise of the environment, you just hear, and we just both lose it, because she essentially just dropped a rock on a child. And I texted Soft Servo, and I was like, day 7, the wife has dropped, or has hit a Korok in the head with the rock and laughed about it for 10 minutes. I think she understands now. So yeah, I can't really play Breath of the Wild. I tried to back when it first came out, because Soft Server was like, you need to play this game, you're gonna love this game. And I had been watching other people play it, and I was like, yeah, I probably will, I'd love to try this game, may I? And so he lent it to me, and I played it for about an hour and a half, and all I remember was I spent the entire hour and a half fighting the controls and not having fun. And I felt real bad, because I still think it's an amazing game, it's just not a game that I can play. And that was even weirder to me, because I learned how to play freaking Fight Night. And that game has, I don't want to call them counterintuitive controls, but the controls for a boxing game to try and emulate the movement of a boxer definitely require you to fight against yourself for a while until it becomes second nature. And once that happens, then you can just be mildly frustrated at the game for not working, instead of fully frustrated at the game because you don't know the controls. And so the fact that I was able to play games like that and be okay with it, but Breath of the Wild, just, I couldn't do it, that was a really weird place for me to be in. And to be honest, with how long I've been playing games, it kind of makes me feel foolish. It's like, why of all games is Breath of the Wild the one that where I throw up my hands and say, I can't deal with the controls? I don't want to fight them, but I don't know. I don't get it. I just know that was the thing that happened, so I never really got into it. But that doesn't make the game any less of a masterpiece. I still insist that Breath of the Wild is one of the greatest games to come out in the past 10 years. I am enjoying all the murder weapons and inventions people are making in Tears of the Kingdom, though. It is fascinating to see how inventive people have gotten with the new crafting system. Which, honestly, that whole thing stunned me, because it feels like everything that Nintendo has been doing with these two games is like 10-15 years behind schedule. Because, you know, like, open world survival games were really big in like 2005 to 2010, and then 5 years later Breath of the Wild comes out, and it's an open world survival game, but it just absolutely nails it. And then Tears of the Kingdom comes out, and it's like, oh, it's a crafting game where you craft things. Like, oh, well, those were popular 5-10 years ago. I can't believe they're doing this. And then that thing comes out, and it absolutely nails it. So it's just like, I gotta just stop doubting Nintendo. They know what they're doing. Oh, I did see a thing that I thought was interesting. They showed the salary comparisons between Activision's Bobby Kotick, the CEO, and I don't remember the name of the gentleman, but the head of Nintendo right now. And it was like the guy at Nintendo is making something like 2.16 million a year, and or somewhere around that amount, and Bobby Kotick is making like 156 million a year. And it's like, there's a huge disparity here, guys. And I guess it just shows, I don't know, correlation is obviously not causation, but it just seems to me that by reinvesting that wealth into your writers, into your programmers, into your artists, you know, into the development of these games, they're able to just make better games. Because Activision's games, I guess they're visually kind of pretty, but they're not that great. But then again, I haven't been a regular video gamer in a long time. I've become one of those old man yells at cloud video gamers who liked how games used to be. Every now and then something will catch my attention, but it'll only last for maybe a week or two, and then I'm kind of out of it again. That actually recently happened with Cult of the Lamb. I was really into Cult of the Lamb for all of about a week. I think I got 20 hours into the game, and then I was just like, I'm done. I don't care anymore. I believe I was on the third god, and the game just lost me. I had gone through the loop enough for it to become boring. But who knows? Who knows? Those games aren't being developed for me anymore, I suppose. They're not being developed to my sensibilities. What did I do on that? Oh, I left it black. Okay, then no. So I need to have some... I need to have some more of this bronze to line the copper piping, the bronze piping, around the canister. And I apologize for not paying too much attention to the camera. I hope I have been on camera with most of my painting. Otherwise, this has probably been a very, very boring stream. It's been guy stares at blank part of his painting canvas for 40 minutes while ranting about Nintendo. What time is it? Okay, we're getting there. It's all good? It's all good. Fantastic. Okay, I think, especially because he's just in the helmet, this guy is all done too. I think I'm gonna go ahead. So what have you been up to, Mr. Motorhead? How are you doing? I didn't actually even see you pop in. How do you like my little frogman over in the corner? My hope is to one day get him into a little environment where he can run around and do things. I even rendered a bolter so that I can equip it to him and he can shoot down heretics. Though I think that'll end up being with Nerf bullets just because I find it funnier. Okay, that should be good. Thank you, appreciate it. I've never used Blender before. This was my first big... Oh no, he's got his pauldrons. My first big exposure to Blender. And it always just seemed so inaccessible by trying to hop onto the program and futz around with it. But I found one really good tutorial video, and that kind of opened the floodgates, and now I can mess around with Blender and have a whole lot of fun with it. I think the next thing I'm going to do is make him a little paintbrush so that he can look like he's over in the corner painting just like I am. Or maybe a walk cycle. I'm not sure yet. He's going to have something interesting happening over there. You finally have a job? Congratulations. Yeah, that's right. You were looking for one the last time I remember really talking to you, so congrats on getting a job. Don't spend all that money on Warhammer. Spend some of the money on Warhammer. Spend the rest on Warhammer supplies. Or else it's hard to play Warhammer. Okay. Dude number 2 is about as done as I can get him right now. Goodness gracious. You're going to spend no money on Warhammer. You see, that's where they get you. That's the smart move. If you spend no money on Warhammer, then you can spend money on things like food and shelter and, you know, stuff that you want. So that's probably the best option, though. Yeah, don't end up like me. Don't spend all your monies on Warhammer and then have to be stuck in a basement painting nothing but Warhammer. The life may look glamorous, but I promise you it is not. Once I get it all rendered, you will see how I truly live. It's on a pontoon in the middle of a swamp. Okay. Go ahead and get more of the power glove that he's wearing. Not power glove, body glove. That's the right word. I will say, these sculpts are impressively detailed, but there is definitely a drop-off in quality compared to the multi-pose sculpts that they've put out. Because there are some really weird parts where things kind of got smeared together. And it's obviously not a bad thing. These are still incredibly high quality. But it just ends up looking really sloppy compared to some of the other stuff. And so I am quite tickled by the disparity between like this launch box monopose stuff compared to their later box set stuff. I'm not painting on camera again. I will say, I can't wait to see what the new stuff is going to be, though. I really want... this is going back, because it just hit my memory again. I was thinking about and talking about much earlier the new releases for the Tyranids and the Space Marines that they're going to be revealing on Saturday. And I'm excited solely because I want to see if they end up making true-scale tactical Marines. I really doubt that they will. There's no reason to. They're being phased out in favor of, you know, intercessors and the like. But I want, after seeing how good the Terminators look, I want me some true-scale tactical Marines. I just think they're such a great, iconic model, and the fact that they're now short and stumpy and funny-looking compared to the current scale just makes me very sad. Though I am also interested in seeing some of the super cool centerpiece models and whatnot that they're going to be doing for the Tyranids. I heard that they're going to have a new centerpiece called a Norn Ambassador or something. And I have no clue what that is, but it's supposedly really big. In the Leviathan novel, the novelization or whatever, a Space Marine apparently, allegedly, hears one of those things or sees one of those things stomping down the hall, and like it's so big that it is shaking the entire hull on the ship. And he claims it's the biggest Tyranid he has ever seen. And so that size is just so enticing, such an enticing preview of eventually what's going to come out. And so I am quite excited to see what they eventually come out with. I know they've got the new, I think it's a new Death Leap, not a new Death Leap, but what is the newest model? They've spoiled it, but they haven't released it yet. It's got like a Cthulhu face and like a flesh trench coat, or a flesh cloak. And once again, fantastic looking unit. Can't wait to hear when it's going to come out. I'm just very excited that the Tyranids are getting a revamped line, because from what I've seen, they really need it. The swarms of small ones is what's scary. Yeah, definitely. What's the point of big nids? Kaiju. You know, things like Godzilla. What's that? Cloverfield. The idea, I guess, is that some of them are so impossibly big that it's just like, wow, nature really hates us. But I do agree that the swarms of the small Tyranids, the fact that it literally looks like a chittering host of Godzilla was lizard, you're correct. But not every one of the kaiju were lizard, if I recall properly. My knowledge of Godzilla and of Kaiju-verse is not great, but Mothra, for example, was definitely a bug. I think it's just the fascination of impossibly large bugs. Like, I don't remember the name of it, but there's that one, Biotyrant. That's what it's called. Kaiju. It's the Japanese word for, like, the oversized giant monsters. So like Godzilla is a kaiju, King Kong is a kaiju, Mothra, Rodan, all of those are kaiju. What I think is really funny is, by the logic, Hanna-Barbera's Grape Ape is a kaiju. Clifford the Big Red Dog is a kaiju. But yeah, it's just the name for an oversized, a ridiculously oversized version of something much smaller. And there's probably more to it. I've never been a huge fan of Godzilla, so my understanding of the lore and whatnot is very bad. But, one moment. Let me see if I can find a picture. Froghemoth is a kaiju, yes. Bio-Tyrant, 40K. I remember seeing one picture of a Bio-Tyrant, and it really made me upset because it just really emphasized the scale of a Bio-Tyrant. Because it was like a defense bastion of like of a city wall, and you saw just an innumerable host of small bug, and it's like, that's a lot of small bug. I don't ever want to deal with that much small bug. And then just in the midst of them, you see what looks like a daddy long leg just towering over all of them, to the point where it's like half the height of the wall. And it's just like, no, thank you. You are way too large. I don't think I'm gonna find any pictures of Bio-Tyrants. Okay, so I'm just gonna show you the let's go. Where's okay, OBS. I saw this movie with oversized cold-blooded creatures and the guy who went from bunker to bunker of his XGF. Were those also kaiju? I guess technically they were. Kaiju was half jokingly used to mean, you know, oversized creature. But in general, it's used to describe monsters that would appear in Godzilla movies. But yeah, that's a Bio-Tyrant. And actually, oh, that's a really good picture of a Bio-Tyrant, because if you look at the guy, you can see, oh, it's on the Reddit. Of course it's on the Reddit. You can see the scale of the Bio-Tyrant. Come on, get bigger. Because down, you know, he's like, okay, it's a bug, whatever. And then you look further down, and you see like those little forms underneath it. I think those are Primarchs kaiju? Yeah, technically a Primarch is a kaiju, I guess, because they're twice the size of a normal human. But yeah, if you look down, you can see the mucilid spores next to him to get an idea of exactly how big a Bio-Tyrant is. I think, are those mucilid spores? I can't really tell. But the point is that Bio-Tyrants are Big E is a kaiju. I like that interpretation of the logic. I like this extrapolation. The Primarchs are kaiju. New canon. I mean, technically, it ain't wrong. Like I said, it's generally used to describe large animals, but I don't think you're wrong in your assessment that the Primarchs and Big E are technically kaiju. But I would have to... I wish there were more people in here. Is Jabba the Hutt a kaiju? I don't know, because Jabba the Hutt I don't think has an animal comparison. Because the idea is they're oversized compared to how they're supposed to be sized. You know what I mean? So Jabba the Hutt, I think, is the right size for his race, or his species, or whatever. Well, slugs technically also don't have arms. I don't know. That's getting into the semantics of kaiju that I am unfamiliar with, and I don't feel qualified to talk about. I guess you could argue that he's a kaiju if he's an oversized slug. I don't see any reason why not to. But like I said, generally when you think of kaiju, well, I guess there's fantasy kaiju too, because the Cloverfield monster is technically a kaiju. But this is a topic of discussion that goes back over a decade. I specifically learned about the meme because on Game Grumps, they used to argue and ask, you know, is this a kaiju, when they would see a large version of something. But yeah, just the running joke, am I kaiju for my models? Well, technically, they're undersized. You are the proper size. They are not. They are miniature replicates of you, of a human being, of, you know, of that scale. I suppose if you want to Toy Story it, then yeah, you're a kaiju, because you are a much larger scale version of humans than they are. But since they are non-living, I guess not. I think your girlfriend always told you were too small. Well, I guess not compared to your minis, you're not. But yeah, like I said, I think the thing that makes a kaiju is how big it is relative to how big it's supposed to be. So, like you said, the Primarchs are great examples of kaiju because they're much larger than they're supposed to be. Oh, okay. I didn't want to take it that way because, you know, fairly obvious reason. Well, I mean, I guess they're not fairly obvious. I'm a school teacher, so I can't make sex jokes like that, especially with students, because then I get fired. Thank you, Cyberworld. I appreciate the follow. I feel a little awkward that it was right after talking about, you know, making sex jokes with students and my inability to do so and lack of desire to do so. But I appreciate the follow. Don't be sorry about that. Nothing bad was said. It's all good. It's just, it's a little bit of humor. I mean, it's not like I stream to my students and, you know, they're going, oh my goodness, my teacher says he wants to make sex jokes with students. That is definitely not the case. It's all good. It's all good. My biggest thing right now is... Good day, I'm Cyber Sean. I'm from Australia. It's 3:51 a.m. You just finished painting a Scorpec Destroyer. Posted a video to TikTok of the process. I couldn't be bothered streaming tonight. Fantastic, and congratulations. That's a really cool model, and I hope this Marine's looking nice. Thank you. I'm actually doing this for a friend. He plays Salamanders, but doesn't have time to paint. So I got these from the Leviathan box, and since I play Imperial Fists, I don't need a flame unit, so I told him I would paint these for him. Am I a kaiju compared to my students? No, I'm actually a little short by average adult size, average adult height in the United States. So if anything, some of these students are kaiju to me. But yeah, I'm just kind of giving these guys a quick paint job and trying to make them look as nice as they can because I promised him I would. I've got the Sergeant done already. I'm going to go back and shade and highlight them later, but this is what I got for this guy. Best way to fight kaiju, always big mech. Always big mech. Pacific Rim is a perfect example of that. I think one of my favorite stories about Pacific Rim is that Guillermo del Toro did not realize how much of Pacific Rim was a reference to Evangelion. I should get a big mech for my kaiju students. They're not that... I'm not that much smaller than them. That and I box. So, I don't need to have big mech to combat kaiju in that case. Most of my students learn very quickly at the beginning of the year that that fist fight with teacher is bad for multiple reasons. And it's not necessarily that I can beat them up, but it's that I've been hit by people far better at punching than they are. And they'll get removed by security, and I'll get a free vacation and lawsuit. But yeah, beyond that story, I'm having a lot of fun painting these guys because even though I do paint a lot of Space Marines, it's typically in the cheese yellow of the Imperial Fist. So trying to paint these Salamanders to look appropriately Salamander-y has been a lot of fun. Because it's not a color scheme I'm used to doing. And to be honest, it's a lot more forgiving than the yellow. The Tau will beat the Nids with their mech suits. I don't think so. I don't think the Tau have anything big enough or what's the word I'm looking for? Numerous enough to beat the Tyranids. One of the biggest problems with the Tau is that, comparatively, they're a very small race. And the Tyranids will just overwhelm them with sheer numbers. This isn't a space wolf? No, this is a salamander. The space wolves have yellow shoulder pads, and they have like a pale silvery blue armor. Did you get me with the sarcasm again? I don't know what's going on anymore. I'm really bad at detecting sarcasm and humor because, once again, school teacher. So I have to take a lot of what my kids say literally, because the last thing I want to do is assume they're joking when they're trying to be serious with me, when asking what to them is a fairly innocent question, and then, you know, giving them grief about it and making them feel bad. I teach a lot of students who already hate school. So, I don't want to make them hate school more. That's kind of what it boils down to. Belt! Belt! Okay. This guy is... Nope, lenses. I was about to say this guy is done, but he needs lenses. Our clients also hate our facility. That's unfortunate to hear. Being in places you don't like sucks. Being in places with people who also hate being there sucks. Am I even on camera? Yeah, I'm actually dead on camera. Fantastic. But yeah, it's become a thing, and it's something that people notice about me very quickly, is I am friggin' terrible at detecting sarcasm. Which was not something I anticipated being an issue in life, but here I am. Oh yeah, I'm glad that you like it. That makes the job go a whole lot better then, I guess. I completely forgot about this lad's backpack. Oh yeah, that's right, you were working, that's where you were applying to. Well, I'm glad that the job has been a good one for you. The prison system is definitely one that, depending on where you are, cannot be a pleasant experience. Okay. I tried to watch a cooking show. It was a Gordon Ramsay one, and something I found out, we're trying to be nice to them if they let us. Yeah, that is true. I mean, they really don't want to be there, so your ability to form any kind of positive professional relationship with them is entirely dependent on them, right? But I tried to watch a Gordon Ramsay show because I realized after watching the American and British version of Kitchen Nightmares that he's very much encouraged to be angrier and louder in the American one, and that they specifically edit it to be a lot more stressful than the British version. And so we found him doing another show on BBC or in Britain where he was going to a prison to work with a certain number of prisoners to help them learn culinary skills. And I was very intrigued in the show, except for the fact that every time he talked about it and gave context, like, you know, I'm in a prison doing this thing, he always had to bring back that, like, society has given up on them, and that they're all horrible criminals and failures of society. And it just felt cruel. So I kind of stopped watching it. It's like, yeah, I understand that they're in prison for whatever crimes that they're in for, and some of them are very violent and heinous, but having to remind the viewer every time that they're terrible people was just kind of dragging on me. Okay. Backpack all done. And with that, I actually need to get going. It's 4 o'clock where I am, and that is the time that I need to feed the pets. Let's give one last look on the guy. He actually turned out pretty good. We have a few terrible people there. Well, that's good to know. That's good to know that it's not too many awful ones. And some less terrible people. That's also fair. I mean, it's a prison. You're gonna get a whole lot of different people depending on the severity of the prison, I guess. But If I stop chatting, I fell asleep. Well, that's fair. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. Go to bed. I don't know what your normal work schedule is like, but it's definitely time for you to do a sleepy. We have to protect the more terrible people from the less terrible people. That's definitely an interesting place to have to be in. That dynamic's got to be intriguing. Painted all day at local today and painting tomorrow at the stores. Well, very cool. That's super neat. I'm gonna have to check you out. You said that you had, was it on TikTok or Instagram that you mentioned? Scorpic Destroyer posted the video on TikTok. I'll have to check that out. Thank you for dropping by and subscribing. But I gotta get going. I gotta go feed my pets and then hang out with my wife. So have a good rest of your day, guys. Have a good rest of your evenings. You have Twitter, TikTok, and stream here sometimes. Then I will have to find you, subscribe, and follow. Maybe not subscribe. I don't have any money, but definitely follow. But have a great rest of your day, guys. Have a good evening, and thank you so much for joining me. Bye-bye. Awesome. Much appreciated. Later, guys.